Hey, kids cook real food. Katie Kimball here for the Healthy Parenting Connector, where, as always, my goal is to connect you, parents who so desperately want to raise healthy, independent adults, with the experts who have the information you need to get you thinking, get you tinkering, get you experimenting and putting on that detective hat with your kids. I am so pleased to have Jess Sherman back today. She was way back, probably one of the first 25 interviews I ever did on the Healthy Parenting Connector. We talked about resilience in that interview. And today we are filling a nice little gap and answering some questions that a lot of parents have. Thanks for being here, Jess.
Awesome. I'm excited to talk to you again.
So we looked at all of our Healthy Parenting Connector episodes and kind of put them in buckets, things like anxiety and depression and picky eating and nutrition. And we realized that anxiety is not only very popular, that's probably not the right word. That makes it sound positive. Anxiety is a very much needed topic now, and especially with our kids. We know statistics are rising in alarmingly the wrong direction, that so many of our kids are struggling with anxiety. It's going younger and younger in our ages and grades, and adults are struggling with anxiety too. So we thought, you know what, we do have some really good interviews on anxiety. We'll link to all those in the show notes, but I wanted more. I wanted to dig deeper, and I really wanted to talk root cause. And as it turns out, Jess has been digging into anxiety root causes for how long, like a year or two now? Or more?
I guess, yeah, a couple of years now. Yeah.
Yeah, like really focusing on that. So today we get to talk about the cyclone of stress and anxiety, and most importantly, how to get kids out of it. So I will read your official bio, Jess, so people know from whom they're hearing, and then we got to jump right in because I cannot wait. Jess Sherman helps kids experiencing anxiety feel better so life can settle down. She started life as a certified teacher and then flipped that career to become a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, board certified in practical holistic nutrition. I can't say all those syllables. How's that? I think I get a trophy. With anxiety in kids now at an all-time high, she's working to help doctors, therapists, teachers, kids, and parents understand and apply a whole child, whole body, trauma-informed, nutrition and lifestyle-focused approach to helping them from the outside in and the inside out. Oh my gosh, we're going to talk for 3 hours. No, probably not. Her book, Raising Resilience, take the stress out of feeding your family and love your life, along with her Calm and Clear Kids program and her resilience roadmap, have reached families all over the world. So we're focusing on anxiety. We're going to weave in resilience at the end because, again, it is whole body, right? We're all one body, one mind. And let's talk a little bit, Jess, about how you came to focus on anxiety. What drew you to really dig in deeply?
Yeah. Okay. Well, as you said, I started as a teacher, so I'm not going to go way back, but that's the general trajectory of like, I've always wanted to understand how people become people, right? Like what drives their motivate, like how do you help someone develop into their best version of themselves? So that's always kind of been my interest. And when I started studying nutrition, because I was a burnt out teacher and I was like, I just need a break. I took a sabbatical. I decided to study nutrition because I was like, hey, I've always been interested in that. And I had little head explosions on the regular of like, oh my gosh, this is so important. What we eat and how we eat, it like literally shifts our biochemistry, which actually changes how we feel and how we function. And I was still a teacher at the time. And so I'm working with all the kids and I'm like, and I was working at a boarding school, so I could see how they were living and how they were sleeping and how many meds they were taking and how they were eating and all of the things. And I was like, oh, gosh, these guys, we need nutrition to be in the mix of the things that we talk about, not only to help kids feel better, but to help them understand how to take care of themselves. Because here we were like a high school trying to equip kids to like go off into the world, and they didn't know how to properly fuel their bodies. They didn't understand their bodies. And then I looked at my own self. I had my first baby at the time, and I was like, oh, how do I keep this thing healthy? Like, I know I can't drop it. I know it has to sleep, and I know I have to breastfeed it. But like beyond that, I was like, I have to learn how to help him live and thrive. And now I'm raising teenagers and I have to help them learn how to take care of themselves. So through all of this, I got really interested in the impact of not only food, but also our environment and our physiology, our genetics, all of the forces that conspire together to create who we are and how we think and how we feel. And along the road there, I created what I call the resilience roadmap. I wrote my book, Raising Resilience, to help people kind of get these tools. And then a couple of years ago, everything changed, and anxiety through the roof, suicidality through the roof, like the screens were shifting how kids were learning and thinking. And I was like, wow, I learned that the average onset of anxiety is age 6.
6.
Yeah. Crazy, right? I was like, what? I also learned that we are the only animal that does this to ourselves, that has, like, we worry about things in the past that we can't do anything about. We worry about things in the future that may or may not happen.
Yeah.
Why do
I
we
mean, I
do
suppose that's our advanced, it's the blessing and curse of advanced cognition, right? Animals probably can't create
Probably.
stress based on things that haven't happened before. Maybe
it's the physiology, but what I have learned about it is it has everything to do with what's going on inside our bodies and what's going on outside of our bodies. So when I brought my head up and I was like, wow, there's a lot of mental health resources, talk therapy groups that kids can be involved in, and some of them are fantastic, but they're all talking about stuff and trying to like shift your mindset. And you can't shift your mindset if you've got, for example, yeast in your gut that is craving sugar and eating up your nutrients. If you've got parasites that are siphoning off, the nutrients that you require to create your feel-good neurotransmitters and those chemicals in your brain that help you feel like everything's going to be okay. Like there's chemistry underneath there. And so it's really hard. So, and I see this with my clients as well. They're like, they go to therapy and like, okay, they're okay for a couple of days. And then they shift back into old patterns. And I think there's a misunderstanding, or not a misunderstanding, but an incomplete understanding of how pressures exert themselves on the nervous system in order to keep it going in one direction, whatever direction it is skewed to go in. And so that's what we look at. How can we pull apart those pressures, relieve them, so that the nervous system actually can go into, like, it's not thinking a different way, it's being a different way.
So I said I wanted to know more about root causes of anxiety and how parents can, dig those up, right? Uproot them, get rid of them. And then you said, no, that's not even the right question to ask. So what are we doing wrong when we say, oh, we want to figure out the root cause of my kid's anxiety?
Well, it's an interesting question, because that's the question that I had when I started. I was like, what's at the root of all this? Like, what's driving it? And as I started to unpack it, I was like, there's not a root, because it's a feedback loop. Stress begets stress. So like when you, and parents intuitively get this, because you can see it in your child, of just like, and we can see it in ourselves too. It's like when you're sick, you're like, I just want to be sick, leave me alone. I know I need you. No, I don't. I need you. And you don't even know what you do, but you're in this like downward cycle. And as you start to get better, you're like, oh my gosh, my body feels better. I can breathe again. I can, I can go outside. I can get the sunshine, and you just want to feel better. And the trajectory changes, right? And the same thing goes on with anxious kids. They're stuck in a vicious cycle, a vicious feed. I'm thinking of it as a cyclone, right? As a cyclone of stress. And I don't even know if, like, on a meteorological level that's accurate, but it just feeds on itself and it gets bigger and stronger. And it's a combination of external forces and internal forces.
Okay.
So I don't think there's a root cause. I think it's different for everybody. So the model that I use is, okay, here are all of the pieces around the cyclone, all of the forces, all of the pressures that I've seen, because I notice patterns. Let's figure out which ones are most important in your case, And that'll tell us what levers we can press, right? That'll tell us where to focus our energy. Because gosh knows, like, we're run off our feet as parents, right? And
Yeah,
we
yeah.
just direction, and we just like, tell me what's going to make the biggest effect, right? And it's different for different people. Some people,
Okay.
it's different for different people. And I don't want people wasting their time, money, and energy, because, we got to hang on to those things.
For sure. Is it fair for me to ask, like, for some concrete examples of what those internal and external forces could be?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll give you an example. One thing I love running genetic panels for people to help them understand their genetics, right?
Okay.
And genetics don't tell you anything about what's happening in the body, but they do tell you what your tendencies are when you're under stress, right? So an anxious kid is under stress. Like, it's a lot of stress. It's a lot of pressure. We don't know the sources of the stress yet. One of the sources of stress, I break it down into 5 main sources of stress. And these are the pressures that put pressure on the nervous system and keep it stuck. One of them is environmental chemicals, environmental toxins, right? Environmental toxins, we have an amazing detoxification capacity. Like, it's beautiful and it's brilliant how we can take all these toxins and pull them apart and make them so that we can flush them from our body. They're not good for any of us. They are a source of stress for all of us, but some of us detoxify them better than others. So when we look at our genetics, I created a genetic panel just for our people. And I told the lab, I was like, I want to understand how well these kids detoxify. And so she's like, cool. Okay. These are the most, well-researched markers around detoxification. We put that in the panel. And if those come up as having a lot of variance in those pathways, well, then you know that keeping chemicals out of your child's life is well worth it, because they just don't detoxify well. And so that becomes a leverage point for you, right? We can run functional tests to see if there actually is toxic accumulation, right? Because remember, genetics don't tell you what's happening. It just tells you your tendency. But we all know that, like, we're bombarded by chemicals. So if you have like a teenage girl, for example, who's getting into makeup, that's a huge source of chemical, right? If you have a kid who is, has kind of OCD-like tendencies and needs everything to be super clean and super proper, there's a lot of toxicity that can come in through cleaning products. So it just means that your energy as a parent to guide your child towards non-toxic options is well worth it. And maybe doing like periodic drainage and detoxing and helping your child understand that, like, you need to do this every year, once a year or twice a year. That becomes
be at your best.
Right? So does that give you an example?
Yeah. So that would be the external world. Can we have an internal example too? Just because I like asking questions.
Yeah, well, some folks don't, again, back to genetics, they don't have, or they have variants in the genetics that regulate the microbiome.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's a genetic factor. It doesn't tell you that they are destined to have a messed up microbiome, but it tells you that, gut support, like eating for good gut health, reducing the sugar, having lots of fiber, lots of color, all of these things, that's going to be a leverage point for you always. And this is helpful when, there's so many parents who are like, yeah, we did a gut protocol, we're off sugar for 6 months and it was terrible and it was so stressful. And then, it just came back. Like, kid felt really good. I've had several people who are like, kid felt really good for a while, but then you can't sustain that with children. And again, we all know sugar's not great for any of us.
Right.
But for some kids, it's like, it's really terrible because it's going to flare your dysbiosis in the gut pretty regularly. So again, you have a leverage point. So you're going to need to do probably a gut protocol, because that can very much influence the brain and anxiety and all that neurochemistry. And you're probably going to have to do it periodically.
Okay. Those are 2 really good examples, I think, because they show the importance of the test, don't guess idea and figuring out, like you said, in this whole cyclone, what are the points in your kid that are the most important? Because we could say all day long, well, hey, everyone should just live a really clean lifestyle. Cut out all the toxins. That's like 57 items in your house that you have to figure out how to rebuy. Eat perfect food, no sugar, probiotics, sauerkraut. Like that's just two of your examples. I'm sure the list would go on and on and on. You could have like a 50-page list for parents. They're going to look at it. Their head's going to explode. They're going to toss it to the side and not do any of them. So what you're able to do is highlight for your kid this one, for your kid this one, basically, right? That's what we're saying on this like 50 pages. We're going to highlight like 3 pages. These are the biggest impact items.
Yeah, I mean, there are some cross the board things. I think, you know, people like to put test, don't guess on t-shirts and things. But the reality is tests are expensive and not everyone can get there. And so there are some pretty solid educated guesses that you can make, you know, which is, and so I've broken it down now. My framework is there are 5 core needs for resilient health. There are 5 core main pressures that keep kids stuck.
Okay.
Right. And so the 5 core needs, like, it's not rocket science. Kids need real food. They need clean air and clean water. They need restorative sleep. They need movement and play. And they need a sense of connection and purpose.
Ooh.
Right. And so, like, you're not going to nail all those 5 things every single day. But what I teach in my roadmap is that when your child is feeling terrible, and this is going to depend on the age of your child and your relationship with them. But when they're feeling terrible, you can look at those 5 things and you can say, okay, like, where do we need to do a little bit of work here? Like, what's fallen off the radar? And I mean, I'm sure there's other ones, but those are, you know,
Yeah.
And then you can sort of take some positive steps. So if if you're starting from scratch and you're just like, I don't even know where to start, my kid is anxious and things are falling off the rails. Frameworks, like if you don't have a container to put your thoughts in, you're just going to go around in circles. So use that container and just going to do a little self-assessment of like, you know, where can we work? And then if you've done all of that and you're just like, we're eating so well and I've got my water filter and my ear filter, I'm doing all the things, I feel well connected with my kids. And that's when it's like, okay, there's a pressure that you haven't found yet.
Okay.
That's when we can look to the second model of like, okay, where's the pressure? And that's when lab testing becomes really helpful, because you can zoom in and you can figure it out pretty quickly.
Okay. Well, I love that. I mean, your roadmap is pretty simple. And the first 4 are kind of the physiological, right? Eat, sleep, move, and environment, I think, if I remembered them right. But that last one, connection, I mean, I think it's one that's so often missed in the medical community, right? Because they're focusing on the person. And then the mental health community is focusing just on the mind. Like you talked about, you can't just talk it out. So to me, the opposite of connection is like feeling threatened, feeling fearful. So let's talk about like those threat and fear messages and how they impact our kids, how they get stuck in the body.
Yeah. And this is where, you know, when you were talking about me and my bio, you know, this is where the whole working from the inside out and the outside in. Like, I really want to bring those 2 things together because they're both important. They're not exclusive, because there's a feedback loop. Just like I was saying, they're caught in this stress storm. There's a feedback loop between our environment and our bodies, between what's going on inside our body, between our context and our bodies. And it's all part of the cyclone of stress. Right. So the connection piece, I mean, that comes from my understanding, my training in attachment and trauma, and, you know, what's going on with kids in the very early days, and even in utero. Right. And how is their nervous system being set up? Because our nervous systems learn first from our biological mother's nervous system. Cool. That's how we're taught. So what was going on with her when she was pregnant?
So then like a stressed out mama might have a more highly stressed kiddo right from birth.
Right from birth. It's just,
baby.
We're getting those messages. Our bodies don't have the capacity to, our nervous systems don't have the capacity to self-regulate until well into the first year of life. We can't find that sense of calm and safety without co-regulation.
Mm.
Ideally, that co-regulation comes from biological mom, because that's what we learned in utero. We learn
Mm.
those messages, and then when we come out, we're just like, okay, oh, look, there's something familiar, right? So you can see there's lots of room for early, micro or major traumas with that sense of safety. And once I learned to ask about it, I'm finding it in 95% of the people I'm working with.
Oh, and when you say it, help me like unpack. That's a 2-letter word, but there's a lot of unpacking there. What are you finding?
Either micro or major or minor traumas, like what we would consider from the outside, because trauma is really about how it lands in the body, not what the event is itself.
Okay.
So little things that can teach a nervous system in those early days that the world is threatening.
Oh.
And it puts you on this like high alert, right? You're more sensitive, more attuned to threat than you are to safety. And you've met those people who you're just like, wow, you just feel so calm and secure, and you expect miracles to happen and good things happen to you, and you live in abundance and you're so positive. That's a nervous system, which in the early days, chances are, was like attuned to safety and calm, and versus the opposite, right? Which you've probably met those people too. We're just like, well, glass is half empty, and this like threat is around the corner, and somebody's hiding behind the tree. And
they make good police officers and military, to be honest.
It's temperament, right? And when you look at the biology of that, you can realize that temperament is it's partly genetic, but it's a lot of it genetic, and it's from those early experiences.
Yeah. What sort of experiences, when you ask about someone's childhood or infancy, what are some of these experiences that you say, oh, that may have landed in the body as a micro or macro trauma?
Yeah. So it can be anything from how stressed out mom was when she was pregnant.
Okay.
Right. Was she also managing a toddler? Like, was she just super hyper stressed, not sleeping? Was she in an abusive relationship? Was she, having economic stress, changing jobs? Was she in a really high stress job? It can be anything from.
Okay.
It can be birth style. Was it a traumatic birth? Were there interventions required? Was there fear and pain? So, well, always obviously pain, but you know what I mean? Like, what was that set up? And it can be early medical intervention. Some kids need to go off to the NICU. Some kids are born by C-section. I remember when I had my first child, he was a C-section, and I got to say hello. It was, super medicalized and all of the lights and stuff. And they took him out, they wrapped him up, they did all their things, like all the, heartbeat and all the things. I got to say hello, but I was basically numb. Right? So he's wrapped up. Dad brought him over to me, and I got to like give him a little like kiss and a little like, oh my gosh, I have a baby. And then he had to go off with dad until my anesthetic wore off. So the doctors were like, you need to stay here, and as soon as you can feel your toes, you can go and see your baby. I didn't know anything about the importance of skin to skin contact, or like I didn't know any of this. So there, my little infant was sucking on dad's finger for about half an hour because he's starving. Because I'm like hungry, right? And I'm like, I can feel my toes. I promise you, I can feel my toes.
Right? Oh, I would so be like popping my feet.
I'm going through this like hormonal mess of having just birthed a baby. And what we want to do when you birth the baby is you want to snuggle it and feed it and nurture it and nourish it and snuggle it, right? So I'm kind of going through this stress response. He's going through a stress response. And and this is where biology comes and genetics come into play, because some kids can get over that. And it's like, okay, half an hour, I got my baby, feeding is good. And some kids, that really throws them into this stress response. So all of these things, postpartum depression, another one, like lots of moms feel disconnected and confused and disoriented and don't have good supports around that. And babies learn from mom's faces how to interact and how again, that's training for their nervous system. So lots of little things. Trouble
lots of
moving.
things, yeah, lots of things that can't be helped in the moment. And certainly 10, 12 years later, we can look back and say, okay, I can identify A, B, and C. But how can we then flip those? They're wired into the nervous system, but I'm thinking that you're going to tell us that is not one's destiny. How do we unravel and shift some of those to like more safety and security feelings?
Yeah, sure, you can. I mean, this is the thing. I tell all parents and anybody listening, like if you're just like, oh my gosh, I did it all wrong. I mean, this is our tendency as parents, right? We're just like, I messed your kid up. You did not mess your kid up. These things are, they are what they are. The only reason to look back is to know how you got here so that you can find your next step forward. Right? So if looking back is gonna like throw you into depression and anxiety yourself, like just take a beat and just remember my words, right? What's done is done, because remember, we're the only animal that can look back and be like, ah, what's done is done. But it can tell you a little bit about why you are, or why your child is where they are now, so that you can find your next step forward. And the kids for whom they had a trauma, any kind of issue in the back, they tend to have less wiggle room with the 5 core needs. They tend to have more pressures of the 5 core pressures. So we can still use the same model. They just need more of those things in order to help them escape the cyclone that they're in.
Okay. So these kids, some people are like, wow, I know that this one really needs his or her sleep. Like they're going to be a mess if they don't go to bed an hour late. Whereas my other kid can handle going to a wedding reception and they'll just be a little cranky. Is that kind of like just a real world example of like the physiology of the one?
And this, I think, when parents, because ultimately, like we always compare ourselves to other people, right? So we're always like, oh gosh, why me? Like, why am I dealing with this like super stress, crazy family? And the people next door are like calm and secure and everything's good. Probably a fallacy because you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. But but this kind of speaks to that. It's like different biology, different story, right? Different physiology. And what we each need to do, I mean, gosh, imagine if we all had the capacity to really dig into our child's physiology and understand their tendencies, their genetics, their core pressures, their capacity to self-regulate from a physiology perspective. And then we have this toolbox of tools. And to be like, you know what, now we know, for example, you don't regulate your microbiome very well. You tend to upregulate inflammation once it's triggered. You don't digest gluten very well. You don't detoxify chemicals very well. So now we can construct a parenting toolbox to be like, okay, so these are the things we're going to focus on. We're probably not going to do that all the time. But when you start feeling terrible, or when we know we're going into a stress storm, like an exam or a performance, or going away to college or something like this, which is a stressful period of time, we employ our toolbox. And we're like, okay, because we understand your biology, we know what to do now. And then when things are going well, it's like you can kind of put it on the shelf and just enjoy. But it helps you kind of tune in to your kids and what they need. And then when they leave home, you give them their toolbox. This is what you can do to keep yourself happy and safe, so that when I had a consultation the other day where a mom was just like, her daughter would have these episodes of just like, I'm so stressed, I don't want to live anymore. Like all of these things, which is terrifying to hear as a mom, right?
Yeah.
But instead of her saying, I'm so stressed, if once she like, let's accelerate this, we're just starting to work together, but let's accelerate this, 6 months from now, we have her toolbox, we understand her biology, then she can know, oh, right, when I don't get my 10 hours of sleep, I feel terrible. So it's no longer, I'm so stressed. It's, oh, I need to go to bed.
I'm so tired.
I'm so tired. Right. Or we know that they don't deal well with additives or chemicals. And then but the night before they decided they'd go out with their friends and eat a few things they don't usually eat. Then the next day they have their episode. Okay, I shouldn't have done that last night. It's going to pass. I know some supplements that I can take to help this, fiddle this along a little bit faster, and I'll feel better tomorrow.
Nice. So as parents, I'm going to try to like wrap this up with a nice little bow. We have to figure out our kids' individual biology. We want to look at the 5 core needs: eat, sleep, move, environmental toxins kept away, and connection. And then we want to try to alleviate the 5 core pressures, and at some point may need to dig into the physiology, whether it's genetic testing or functional testing. Did you ever say the 5 core pressures?
The 5 core pressures that I have found, and this is just in my own, seeing, so I'm sure there's other ones, but what I see is a pattern. I see nutrient imbalances. I see food reactions. I see toxicity overload and poor capacity to detox, which you talked about. I see stuff going on in the gut, because the gut affects the brain and the brain affects the gut. And I see infections.
Okay. So all 5 are physiological.
Yeah.
Inside the body, well, some coming from outside, what you eat, what touches your skin, what you breathe.
It's when those 5 core, one or several of those 5 things are present, they put pressure on the nervous system so that it becomes highly attuned to stress. And so then the external pressures, the social stuff, the fight with your friend, the I don't want to take out the garbage, whatever it is, becomes a big thing because your nervous system is like at capacity. And so it just doesn't, it's like, people have heard the analogy of like your stress bucket of like water, like you can stress like water filling a glass. When those core pressures, they fill up the glass pretty quick. So kids are living at the brim, and then the littlest thing tips the balance. So when we alleviate them and we reduce them, we make more room in the glass so they can handle a little bit more pressure. They can handle a little bit more unknown, right? That's what anxiety is. It's like, can't handle not knowing what's going to happen and anticipating and catastrophizing, right? So
I know we're almost at the end of our time. I promise that we loop in resilience, because that's kind of where you started life. How do you work with your clients incorporating the idea of resilience with combating anxiety?
Well, I see them as one and the same now, because resilience, I've always thought of resilience as our capacity to handle stress. You have anxiety, you don't handle stress very well, right? You don't handle the unknown, you don't handle the pressures. And I've expanded my understanding of it to be not just your capacity to handle stress, but your capacity to grow from stress. Because stress is an important part of life, right? And if we can't take an experience that's stressful, learn from it, move forward, and it shifts us a little bit in a positive direction, that's what I think resilience is. What's happening with kids is they're having a stress, they're internalizing it, and it's taking them in a downward spiral instead of learning from it and helping them grow. So I do see them as one and the same.
Makes perfect sense to me. Well, let's wrap up. This has been like a lot. I feel like I'm a little bit in the cyclone right now, because there's so many different, and that's the point and the problem, right? Is that each of our children's biologies is different. So the answer isn't A, B, and C, it's here's the alphabet soup, stand in the middle and figure out where your kid is. Is there anything, and I hope there is there anything that you can close out with that all parents could do with all kids to take one step?
Slow down.
Oh, slow down what?
Oh gosh, life has become so busy, right? It's like we're all spinning out. We don't have time to breathe, let alone think, let alone tune into our kids. And I think kids are feeling that. I mean, we co-regulate with our kids. So whatever's going on with us is going on with them. right?
Okay.
So I think of ecosystems, right? Like we've got our ecosystem, we've got us and our environment. We've also have our family ecosystem. And just
Right.
like go for a walk with nothing in your ears, preferably around nature,
Okay.
and just like breathe for a sec. That's one thing. If you can do it with your kids, that would be good too.
Yeah, yeah.
Nature helps us co-regulate.
Okay,
So
that's awesome. Because I wanted to say, like, what if you're in a season where slowing down would mean like quitting the play or, just like causing great disaster in your kids' lives? Can you slow down in small moments? And I think you just answered that yes,
yeah,
you can.
I think you can slow down in small moments, but I also think sometimes you have to say no to things. And
Right.
this is where the value of the 5 core needs for resilient health can come in. If you can start thinking of that as a framework, talk about it at the dinner table. Like we
Ah,
do have a lot of balls that have to go in the air. And if you're feeling I did a podcast episode with my friend Jen Pike, and she put it beautifully. She talks about teen hormones and things like that. And she's like, there's 2 great times to talk to your kids about what's going on with them.
yeah.
One is when they feel terrible, right? And always inviting them into the conversation, because sometimes when you feel terrible, you don't want to talk about anything, but always, hey, I've been learning a little something about, what goes on in your body when you feel like this. Can I share that with you?
Yeah.
They might say no, and that you have to respect that. They might say, yeah, I don't want to feel like this anymore, Mom. Like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. Okay. Now you can bring in, these are the things that we need for resilient health. And what I've noticed is like, we're not drinking any water.
Mm.
Like, that's not going to obviously solve the problem, but it's a step in the right direction. And it gives them a positive thing to think about and do. Okay, I'm gonna do that. Now they're nourishing themselves a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's one time when you can talk to them. Another time you can talk to them is when they're feeling awesome.
Okay.
Right? They're feeling awesome. They're doing well. It's all good. Be like, hey, you know what I've noticed? I've noticed you're getting a ton of sleep these days. That really helps you, doesn't it?
So it's
Right?
drawing those lines dot to dot. This makes you feel this way. This makes you feel this way.
Or on the connection piece, like you just like got involved with that club and you're feeling like a good sense of purpose and connection, and wow, that really helps you feel good, doesn't it? And just leaving it at that, right? So that then you can come back to it when they're not feeling so good.
Right. Yeah. Well, and thinking about scheduling is that's how you can make scheduling decisions. Like my 17-year-old and I were just talking last night. He wants to be involved with middle school theater in the spring, same as track season, and he's a pole vaulter. So he will have practice 3 to 5 and 5 to 6:30. Boom, boom. And I said, well, like you'll need to make sure you take 2 water bottles and pack a good snack. And I probably should have said, can you do this and get enough sleep?
Right.
That's how we ask the questions, right? Can you schedule this way and still take care of those 5 core needs?
Right. And I mean, I'm imagining this is like on the fridge to be like, let's go to the fridge and let's look at our chart. Let's see, can you do all of this? Be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to need to eat a bit better. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to need to make sure I get to bed. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to have to make sure. Right.
So good.
And
So we have
yeah.
to learn this as parents. We have to pass it on to our kids. It's just got really practical, which means now I'm in love. And we've dialed it in for the parents. And now parents have something to like tangible to walk away with. Thank you, Jess
I'm so
Sherman.
glad. I'm so glad. I mean, I think, gosh, we just don't have time to think, right? Like, how many of us have talked to our parenting partner, if there is one, about the culture you want to set up in your home, about how you talk about food, about how do we think about our health? Like, it falls off the rails so quickly because you're shuttling from one place to another, right? So that's another real tangible thing. Like, go for a walk, think about it, and then go for a walk with your parenting partner, if there is one, if you can, and think about it, talk about it. Like,
Be intentional. I love that. That is very good homework. And homework number 3 would be print the 5 core or maybe doodle, right? Because that's anxiety reducing for some of us, right? Doodle the 5 core needs and get them on your refrigerator if a magnet sticks to your fridge anymore. That's like an outdated thing.
maybe I should make little magnets. I'll try to make those. If people want a recap of that, they can go to my website, jesssherman.com/biology of behavior, or just jesssherman.com, and you'll see it at the top there. I think it says start here or watch video or something like that. And I talk about the 5 core pressures. I talk about how do you understand what are the factors involved in how your child behaves and why they do what they do.
Nice. Oh, love it. Thank you very much, Jess. I know this will be super helpful for parents because we're all, like you said, too busy, feeling a little on edge, spiraling, feeling that anxiety. And we just need a roadmap, which is what Jess of the Resilience Roadmap does. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Kids Cook Real Food listeners, I'm Katie Kimball for the Healthy Parenting Connector. I will see you back next time with yet another expert who has the information you need to build healthy, independent adults.